Hello, good morning once again. Thank you very much for staying on TV3. This is NewDay, and we are live from Adesawe. Right about now, we are going into what a campaign we at TV3 have championed in the last few days. We call it the June 3 in Perspective. And we are just looking at raising awareness, drawing people's attention to the deeds that, drew us closer to that kind of disaster that was recorded on the 3rd of June. This year, very disastrous moment that we would not want to recount or want to recur in this country. And so we have set up this special segment on NewDay to pay attention to what we should do as a country. Now, one other aspect of this whole debate has had to do with the participation at the local level of the local government system. And is it working effectively? What can we do as individuals to empower the persons who have been appointed or elected into those places? And even talking about that, should they be elected or just appointed? It's a debate that has been ongoing for a few years now. Let me introduce my guests briefly, then we'll take a documentary, then we'll come back to start the discussion. On my immediate right, we have Farouk Brahima. He is the Executive Director of People's Dialogue Ghana, and he is joined us this morning to have this discussion. And then also my extreme right, we have Dr. Franklin Oduro, Deputy Director, CDD Ghana, Head of Research and Programs. And they are seated. We'll be going to the discussion shortly. Stay with us.
For the past 20 to 30 years, the World Bank has pumped close to $1 billion into various projects in the Urban 1, Urban 2, Urban 3, Urban 4, urban environmental sanitation, second urban environmental sanitation, urban roads, urban water, urban transport, easily $1 billion. Why is it that after all these years, we still have so many challenges? There is clearly a problem of governance.
Home to over 2 million people, Accra is one of Africa's fastest growing cities, boasting burgeoning shopping malls, housing estates, office blocks, and an ever-widening skyline. A busy and prosperous city. But it's also a city of chaos and dreadful disorder, a city of choked drains, congested streets, and overwhelming filth. A city of hardship and overcrowded slums. Introduced by the Rawlings government in the late 80s, its intention was to decentralize governance, devolving power and responsibility to local authorities or district assemblies, and give citizens a meaningful say in the development of their communities. Former Accra Mayor Natamate Fio remembers.
It was designed, so far as I understand, at a time when a new government was trying to spread governance as widely as it could. The government was, however, worried about keeping control of the whole organism. And so as much as it tried to spread authority and responsibility down the road, when it got to the top, it wanted to ensure that responsibility was in safe hands.
At the time, in safe hands meant deploying technically capable people to the assemblies to ensure delivery. So while citizens elected 70% of assembly members, the president himself appointed the remaining 30%, as well as the district chief executive, the mayor. 20 years on, the practice remains unchanged. Question is it still appropriate, and is it delivering on its promises?
I'm Janet Edu from Ashama to Laku. I've stayed here for about 25 years now, and we have a lot of problem here. Our drainage, our sanitation, like toilet. This community have about, let me say, 2,000 people, but we have only one toilet down there. So every day, all this community have to move from here, go and queue.
Meanwhile, they take revenue from the people. What are they supposed to do with the people? Because they are supposed to use that revenue to fix the problems that we face in these communities.
What really know is Accra Mayor. But when they are in office, they don't allow people like we to come and express ourselves and see what is going on around. Because we don't put on ties. We don't put on coats. They don't regard us. But we are the first that we know what is going on. That's how it is.
Because the mayor is answerable to the president and not the people feel powerless. And according to political scientist Amos Ayimadu, the problem has deep roots.
The modern Republic of Ghana is a very reluctant republic. It's a reluctant republic in the sense that if you look at Ghana in a deep political way, actually we don't want to be electing a modern president. What we really need is a larger chief. And effectively that's what we do. So that, the president is actually the chief of chiefs.
The theory is borne out by the Constitution.
All right, so you heard David Amper for putting that report or documentary together with his team, Channel 2 Communications. Let's come in studio and discuss some of the things we saw and see how best we, as TV3 and my panelists, can put that issue in proper perspective. Good morning, gentlemen.
Yeah, good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. Taking off from where the documentary left off, we're told that some years back under the Rawlings regime, the decentralization system was supposed to give the citizenry a meaningful say in how their communities are developed. Have we achieved that? No, let me start with you, CDD, then we'll come.
Well, let me put it this way. I think it's still a work in progress. There are some accomplishment that we have.
10 years and counting.
Well, governance is a process. I think we need to ask the political will to really decentralize. And I think that political will is still missing. We still want to talk about decentralization. We want to give power to the people, but at the same time, we want to hold on to power at the center. And it's all because of the kind of politics that we are embarking on in this country in terms of the patron-client political system that, as Dr. Ayimadu said, the chief of the chiefs still wants to hold on to power, still want to control resources. And the more you control resources and you control power, both appointive and distribution of resources, the more you can control your position and your way of continuing to rule in this country.
So clearly there isn't that political will.
Exactly. I think that in theory, there are nice things about decentralization in terms of what we wanted to do. But it takes political will to say that I'm going to give out power and I'm going to give power to the people to be part of the governance process. And I think that political will is still missing.
Okay, Farouk, you have interacted with the ordinary people on the streets. What have they told you? Is there that willingness that they can really handle their own if they are given that power?
Let me say clearly that local governments ultimately are judged by the quality of life of its citizens, how well they are able to provide basic services, water, like she just mentioned, sanitation, energy, transport. These are very basic to every human being. And for me, so long as people are not able to prioritize and access these needs, out there, the verdict is that local government systems are not working. Beyond the services, we also look at its role in democracy, participation. Again, you would see that that whole value of allowing people to participate in the process is also seriously under threat. And so on the streets and the people that we interact with, gradually we are beginning to feel a bit apathetic towards the whole process. It doesn't seem to solve problems. The pressing needs that are supposed to be addressed are not being addressed. And we all look on with some frustration.
How can the citizenry in a decentralized system be able to marshal some of these things that you're talking about? Can they have their own rules made for them? How are they going to empower themselves?
All right. Probably, I would want to look at it from probably the conceptual basis for the whole process. I think we have a very complex decentralization and local government process. I think what we have currently, we've tried to do some decentralization, but not the local democracy. In fact, we need to sharpen our focus on where decentralization ends and where local governance starts. Okay. So over the years, you would find very beautiful legislations and laws around the deconcentration, the devolution, the delegation from the center to the districts to the substructures. These are well documented. Now, beyond this are how to activate the frontline participation channels. And when I say frontline, you and I know that the unit committees are not functioning. And you just don't take off the ladder. That is the ladder. That is the connect between the local government systems and then the citizenry. It is the focal point, that is the first point of involvement of citizens, and yet there is no funding. Okay, so if you read all the legislations and all the financial arrangements on the local government system, we are missing a very critical block, which is the unit committees. In fact, when it even comes to emoluments and recommendations and salaries of officers of the whole system, you hear the MCE's salaries and emoluments will be discussed, the assembly members will be discussed, and the unit committees are left. And from where I sit and my work over the last 15, 20 years, we need to allow the unit committees to function. Because that's the only level that you can interact. At the unit level, the town and area councils are supposed to collate views. We are wondering who the assemblymen represent in the assembly. I'm saying this because you have an assembly, an area of the municipality or a metropolitan area, you are dealing with 95,000 or 200,000 people. At what stage do the assemblymen have the opportunity to collate views of citizens in their communities, let alone go to represent them in the assemblies and then play back the issues to the community? So again, these are very critical.
But by extension of this debate, these are people that the community members themselves have nominated or appointed or voted for. So why is it that they are not empowered? I do not understand the empowerment bit. And maybe let Dr. Odro come in here, then you can continue.
Well, let me continue from where my colleague has. I think he's correct. There is a sense of disconnect between the citizens at the local level and also the governance. And this disconnection or this disconnect comes from two perspectives. One is the fact that people don't feel that they are part of the local governance system. They don't think that they can hold the assembly or the institution accountable. They don't think that the assembly is responsive to their needs. And they don't have a lot of opportunities to engage. The second part of it also comes from the supply side, and that is also from the local authorities themselves. To what extent do they feel that as an MCE or DCE, you are responsible to the citizens? Currently, that's not the case. In fact, they see themselves accountable to the center, to the president. I will tell you
we know that just about 30% of them are appointed.
Yes.
And so that 70 that were elected, how do they also feel accountable to the center, as we're calling it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it triggers. So if the DCE or the MCE feels accountable more to the center than even the elected assemblies, then they become powerless to even hold the DCEs accountable. And in that sense, how would they also be accountable with the assemblies? I mean, studies that we have done, other institutions have done, will tell you that hardly would you find citizens looking for assembly man or woman to complain. Hardly would they assembly man or woman organize, community forums to tell them whatever transpired at the assembly. There's no forum, there's no opportunity for the elected assemblyman or woman to engage the citizen. And the citizens, the demand side also is weak. We don't even respect the bylaws that have been put in place. We are not educated on the bylaws that have been put in place. So there is a whole gap between the citizen and then the local government. Until we break that connection and until we remove the obstacles to accountability and responsiveness, we will continue to have the same problems, as my colleague was alluding to.
Okay, now let's shift the attention to the June 3 disaster and then the roles that district assemblies and local governance could have played, to either mitigate or forestall this. What are the defined roles of the district assemblies when it comes to issues of sanitation, for instance?
Well, I mean, there are clearly, if you look at the Local Government Act, specified functions for the assemblies in terms of what kind of bylaws, what kind of roles in terms of sanitation, in terms of enforcement, in terms of delivery of services, as Farouk was alluding to. And so the whole idea of our local government system of decentralization was to give that power to these people to perform, to deal with that. Over the years, they are not doing that, and there's a lot of factors to that. But I think part of the problem, and then coming back to June 3 and how to avoid that, is to how do we ensure that we enforce the laws that we have put in place?
Right.
How do we ensure that we educate the citizens to understand these bylaws so that they can also respect them? I think until we do that, and until there is strong enforcement of these laws, and until we remove politics, because sometimes part of the reason why we don't enforce these things is because we are afraid that it will come to haunt us when it comes to national elections. And so even if we know that we are not supposed to build here, we still close our eyes on that. So I think it's a question of enforcement. We know the right thing to do. We know how to prevent these disasters. This is not the first time. It has happened over the years. It is only a fool who doesn't learn from
and repeats
past.
the same thing, expecting different results. Yes, Farouk, clearly the empowerment at the local level doesn't seem to be coming form like a trickle-down approach we were talking about. How else, going forward, do you think that then, if it is not coming, how else can we as individuals empower ourselves in that regard?
Probably you permit me to take some 2 steps back into this whole discussion. You see, we've had this whole experimentation. It's a work in progress, and we have this experimentation like 20 years. Down the line, we had an opportunity, a window or a door of opportunity, the Constitutional Review Commission. In fact, there was an extensive discussion from Ghanaians on how they expect reforms in the local government system. Now, the government white paper that was released, so there are some very interesting, if you like, positions that government took. And for me, one of the key ones that I would want us to refresh our minds on as citizens is the one on elected MMDCs. Ghanaians were unanimous that they should be elected. Now, the white paper comes out to say President appoints 5 people. They go through the Public Services Commission, 3 are shortlisted, and they end up in the public election. Right. This is a very delicate balance. Let's get these things rolling. This was 3-4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Why are we still not discussing these issues? The second point about that has to do with the role of the Regional Coordinating Council. It's very critical. In fact, the whole local government system revolves around the Regional Coordinating Council at the regional level, and then the district assemblies. So if you look at the regional coordinating councils and their functions, the monitoring roles that they have to play in the district, integrating all the plans in the region. Because issues of flood, just to clap on you, doesn't respect jurisdictional and administrative boundaries. Okay, so the role of the RCCs are very critical in ensuring these kinds of environmental sustainability that we are discussing. Now, having looked at the Constitutional Review Commission recommendations that we shouldn't go through the popular elections, but people wanted popular elections. There's a very critical aspect of this whole report that I think civil society must rise up to the occasion. Myself and my brother here, we are all guilty of that. I think the level of agitation is quite not too good for my liking, because here we are, Ghanaians have been consulted in 2010 or 2011. We use state resources to set up the commission. Very far-reaching recommendations are in the report. The white paper has been released by government. 3 years down the line, things are still the way they are. MCEs are still handpicked by the president. come to the elected members, we have a 30%. Now, clearly, it was recommended that this 30% must be done in consultation with traditional authority. The white paper says no. It should continue to be the president doing that in consultation with the traditional authority and other groups. Now, I'm saying this because most of the discussions we have, if we are not able to take seriously some of the recommendations from the Constitutional Review Commission, I think that's my starting point.
That's where a lot can be done.
The meat is in there. Yeah, if we take that document and begin to cascade it down on the recommendation that I've given, I believe we'll have a far-reaching impact on people. Look, we have an unfunded mandate. We shouldn't pretend we don't know what is happening in the situation. Okay, the local government system, they were given so much responsibility, municipal services, providing water, sanitation, light and social services and quality of life services. Yet, the commensurate funding and resources that should allow them to deliver has not been given.
By extending this discussion, certainly it's not it wasn't something that happened overnight. The fact that the funding isn't coming, this is an age-old issue that we've discussed. Funding isn't coming, and because of that, we can't do A, B, and C. Can the communities, districts themselves, generate funds, and through what means, and who would manage those funds? I think that will be the last of this, and by extension, still Jones in perspective, if they do that, how can that help in forestalling some of these things?
Well, I mean, the funding is still remains an issue. In fact, one of the deficits in our decentralization, the fiscal decentralization, we still have not been able to get our mind over it. But also, we also have to be realistic that not many of the districts can really generate funding.
Okay.
So it's a question of still the center trying to still be responsible for that. But what requires is what kind of autonomy that the districts will have when the resources come to be able to direct funding to where it needs. You'll notice that sometimes by the time even the common fund goes, certain deductions have been made at the center. So the center knows best for you. So we've already acquired this for you and we've taken it away. It's still elitist. It's still a central regime holding on to resources and dictating and determining what kind of resources, how much, and when it will go. That undermines the local government system. It weakens the financial stability of that. Right. And I think we need to look at that. But of course, we can also generate a lot of funding if citizens living in the local area really engage and understand what the assemblies are meant to do. And if the assemblies are also responsive and accountable to the people. Right. And that is the only way when I'm paying my levy, I know that I can go walk to the assembly and demand to see the DCE. And I say, what have you done with my money?
Okay. I see. All right. Yes. Final words, Farouk?
Yeah, I think my final word is that we need to revisit the far-reaching recommendations of the Constitutional Review Commission. That's my starting point. And then there are very good things that we should activate. One is about the public elections of the MMDCs, which the president has listed 5, 3, and then you elect. The second one has to do with the funding capabilities of the assemblies. I'm told recently there has been some steps to allow them to go for municipal bonds, and then increasing the threshold of how much they can receive, and then strengthening local participation in planning, especially the excluded in our society. That's really.
Those are some of the things that could help. All right, thank you very much for joining us this morning for this discussion. I've been speaking to the Head of Research and Programs and Deputy Director at the CDD, Dr. Franklin Odro, and then also Farouk Brahima, Executive Director of the People's Dialogue. And they joined us this morning to look at June 3 in perspective.